My name is Derek Stowell, and I'm the garden educator here at the University of Tennessee Gardens. And today we are going to be talking about microgreens. So I'm going to go ahead and start showing my screen of the PowerPoint. And so what we'll do is, if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat, and I'll do my best to kind of go back and review that time to time throughout the meeting. So we will be discussing microgreens, and I'll be talking about how to grow those. So microgreens are a pretty easy thing to grow. They can be grown year-round, and so that's one of the things I really enjoy about them. Did want to kind of discuss a little bit about our terminology. So some words that you might find or might see out there are things like sprouts, microgreens, baby greens, and mature greens. And sprouts tend to be the first thing you see developing. Tends to be the germinated seed, the plant with the roots emerging. And most of the time, you're probably familiar with bean sprouts. Microgreens are kind of the next stage of plant growth when we're thinking about producing for food, and that would be when they're about 2 to 3 inches tall. It takes about 7 to 10 days to produce microgreens, depending on which cultivar, which plant you're planting. Next level up, as they get a little bigger, they get about 4 to 6 inches, and then we tend to call those baby greens. And then it takes about 20 to 40 days. And then the mature greens, or the mature plant, is usually over 6 inches tall, and that usually takes 40 to 60 days for those to be ready for harvest. So we are going to talk about what microgreens are. We're not going to really focus a lot on sprouts. So microgreens are the harvested stems, cotyledons, and emerging true leaves of edible plants. There's a lot of flavor in the leaves. You'll find some of the plants you might sow, for instance, radishes. The radish microgreens, you eat the leaves, and they taste a lot like radishes. So that if you don't like the kind of the I guess spicy radish flavor, you might not want to grow radish microgreens. Again, they're 2 to 3 inches tall, and usually harvest them in 7 to 21 days, depending on, again, the type of plant. They are very easy to grow, and they can grow year-round. The other really neat thing about microgreens are they are very often very colorful, so it kind of adds some color to your house if you're growing them inside. But one of the most important things why I like them and why they're a great thing to grow is they are very nutritious. So there are a few downsides to microgreens, and one of those are you do need a lot of seed for those to grow. So typical, you go to a store, you buy a seed packet, you might have 10 to 20 seeds in that packet. And if you think about microgreens and you're just harvesting the little cotyledon, or emerging first set of leaves, they're not large. So 10 to 20, those little plants growing aren't going to provide much microgreens. So you do need to tend to buy those in bigger bulk amounts. And I'll talk about where to go to buy some of those seeds at the end of this session. The other thing is you tend to harvest them before they produce any fruit, so you're not going to be able to necessarily save the seeds from those. One of the things I tend to do when I do grow microgreens is I might leave 3 or 4 plants and not harvest those, and then I'll let them grow larger, and then I'll just transplant those outside to get some more produce later on in the season if I want. They do dry out a lot because of the amount of plants you have growing in a space is pretty dense, and so you do need to keep those moist to keep them from drying out. So again, I mentioned that microgreens are very nutritious, and so they are rich in nutrients. Researchers have found that in a lot of these plants, you'll see higher levels of vitamin C, E, beta-carotene, lutein, xanthine, viloxanthin, and I have no idea how to spell those correctly, but they're important nutrients. Vitamin C, for instance, in red cabbage has been found to be 10 times higher than mature cabbage. But again, you need to think about when you're looking at that, there's high levels of vitamin C. The amount of seed you have to get the amount you would of like a full head of cabbage it would be a lot. Beta-carotene produces which helps protect cell membranes, can be 200 times more than in the grown red cabbage. The lutein and zeaxanthin, which help with eye health, are found in cilantro, and they're usually about 5 times the amount in the microgreens versus the mature plants. And then cabbage, again, has vitamin E, which is usually about 4 times the amount. So the amounts of nutrients in them are very high. And so it's a very nutritious option to be growing in your home. Planting these. And so I tend to think about grouping these according to their growth rate, and I'll kind of show some photos in just a little bit to explain a little bit why and how that looks. But so this is just a rule of thumb, 7 to 10 days is kind of when you harvest these, and pea shoots and radishes. Radishes typically, 30 days you harvest from the time from sowing the seed to harvesting, if you're wanting to harvest the actual radish. But the microgreens, again, in about 7 days you can harvest those peas and radishes. 10 to 15 days, mustards, kales, bok choy, red cabbage, kohlrabi, and arugula are some good examples that you could group there. 16 to 25 days, beets, red amaranth, carrots, scallions, chard, cilantro, and basil are some examples for that. And so to sow these seeds, you need a few things. You need soil and a container. And so microgreens, a shallow container works really well. I'm going to show some examples of containers you can use. But again, what we're doing is we're trying to get the cotyledons, or the first seeds, leaves developing, and the stem. So you don't need a lot of space. You don't need a lot of root space. So you don't have to buy a big container, fill it full of soil. So it will save you a little bit of money that way. We tend to use a soilless growing media. Potting soil works great. We use a couple of different products at the gardens that are we get from a local greenhouse supply. One of those products is called Lambert's. The other one's called ProMix, and they are a planting media. You can get a germination mix there, or you can just get general potting soil. And our product mostly is peat moss and perlite mixture. As you plant it, it's good to sow the seeds evenly, so you can just kind of sprinkle them over the top of the soil. One of the seed companies that sells microgreen seeds is Johnny's Seed, and I'll talk a little bit about them in a minute. But they suggest seed placing, small seeds about 10 to 12 seeds per square inch, and larger medium seeds 6 to 8 seeds per square inch. So an example, but the difference between the seeds, that spacing would be something like broccoli seeds, kale seeds, cabbage seeds are fairly small, versus sunflower seeds, which are much larger. Again, you don't need to count out how many seeds you put in that space, but just as a general idea, you don't want to have a blanket of seeds necessarily completely across there. You do want to see some of the soil as you sprinkle and sow those seeds on there. Again, what we're wanting to do is get the material, the plant material growing so we can harvest it. We don't want to waste seed also by putting too much in one space. So the next thing you can do in our greenhouse setting, I have oftentimes, after I sprinkle the seeds over top of the soil, I would put a little soil, like less than a quarter inch of soil on top, and kind of press that in. The other way you can do that is just literally sprinkle the seeds on top of the soil and press the seeds in with your hands, just down so they're firmly in the soil and so that they aren't going to move around. I covered with some soil a lot in our greenhouse, because when we have people watering with watering wands and things, and our sprinkler system sometimes would kind of put too much water on too hard, and it blasts the seeds right out of the seed tray. So I do cover that up, but you don't need to. And again, if you don't cover it up, it helps make it a little easier when you harvest. There's not some soil on top of the leaves very often that way. And also, the other benefit of not putting soil on top is you're saving soil, which also saves you money in the long run. To water these, the best way to water is by misting. And so you can, if you have a greenhouse or you have space somewhere in the house where you have run a hose or something, you can get a misting nozzle to put on the end of your hose, and it produces a fine mist that works really great. But inside I have a plastic water spray bottle, and that works fine for keeping these microgreens moist enough and enough water so they don't die. Harvesting microgreens. And so, again, in 7 to 20 days, you're going to be able to harvest your microgreens. And the best way to do it is I just have some kitchen scissors, and I'll go and just take them and cut it off near the top of the soil and harvest those. One of the things as you're harvesting, you kind of do need to kind of be careful a little bit. Sometimes you'll get soil in with the leaves, and you'll just want to go rinse that off when you go before you eat it. You can refrigerate these for up to 10 days. And then when you're finished with the soil, a lot of people always ask, well, can you reuse the soil? And so typically, you don't want to reuse your soil when you're sowing plants, because if for some reason you get a bacteria or fungus in that soil and you put more seeds in there, you're just going to spread that and it's going to kill the plants. Also, when you're growing microgreens, and I'll kind of discuss it when I show the photo, but you don't need 3 inches of soil in your container. Really, a ½ an inch to an inch is probably going to be enough, if not too much. And so you can maybe even play around and get less, because once these seeds start growing, they'll that space will turn mostly into roots, and instead of having soil after harvesting these after 7 to 14 days, you're going to have just root mass, and then you can go out and compost it. So I tend to often just take the soil that I'm used the microgreen and growing the first set of batch, I'll just go dump it in my compost bin outside, and I'll turn that in. And then we do on our YouTube channel, we do have UT Gardens has a YouTube channel with a lot of these videos posted. We have a composting video on there if you want to learn a little bit about composting, to see how to do that if you're interested. So there are a lot of different things you can use you can grow and eat as microgreens. This is just a quick list. Chia, black chia. If you've ever eaten chia seeds, a lot of people like that for health. I would say out of all the microgreens I've grown, these are my least favorite. They tend to be a little bitter compared to other leafy things. But chia you can eat that as a microgreen. Sunflower seeds, or sunflowers, sorry, not the seeds. But you plant the sunflowers, they will grow fairly quickly. The sunflowers make great microgreens. Almost has, to me, like a nutty flavor. The one thing about sunflowers is you need to harvest them fairly soon once you start seeing the leaves and the stem growing. And I'll show a photo again to do an example. But sunflower seeds, if you've ever seen a mature sunflower plant, the leaves have kind of little tiny hairs on them, and we call that pubescence in horticulture. And so they're fuzzy. And so the cotyledon, which is the first leaves that start emerging from the plant, are oval shaped, and they're very smooth without that pubescence on them. Once you start seeing the true leaves growing on the sunflowers, you eat those. It's really itchy on your tongue, so you want to just harvest them before those start growing. Radishes, again, there's tons of varieties of radishes. There's a lot with purple leaves, so you can kind of mix those up, and that's where you kind of see your color. Mixed greens are just kind of a mixed leafy greens, salad kind of mixes. Kale, which is one of my favorite microgreens. Spinach, peas, alfalfa, broccoli, basil. There's a lot of varieties of basil, and again, there's a lot of different, some purple color leaves and green leaves. Same thing with kale and cabbage. There's some red leaf cabbage and kales and mustard. So those are just a few examples, and there's more you can find when you start searching online. And in just a minute, I will talk quickly about where we go to get seeds and how to look for microgreen seeds. So these are some examples that I'm going to show quick. I showed these a couple of years ago for a class, and these were sowed on the 16th of February. Chia, sunflower, radish, mixed greens, kale, spinach, and red cabbage. And so this is 3 days later, and if you notice on this photo, on the left here, you've got, these are the radishes. And so again, radishes grow very quickly versus and I cannot tell what the two plants here in the middle. Right here, let's see, the fourth one from the left is kale, so it's starting to come up, and you can see some of the chia starting. And then I've got some sunflowers and some of these round ones. And so these are little, this tray here is what's called a 1020, and these trays don't have holes in the bottom. If you're growing plants, you want to typically have holes to allow water to drain through. But these, because we're growing them so quick and we're using a mister instead of watering like we would a mature plant, you don't need to have the holes because you're just trying to get enough moisture for the plants to grow. The other saucers there are just like terracotta saucers. Those will dry out pretty quick unless they're sealed with a sealant. So this is on the 20th, so 4 days later. You can see again the radishes are pretty much, those are ready to harvest. The leaves almost look like heart-shaped leaves kind of. And then kale right there is just about ready to harvest. The cabbages, I guess, are in the middle here, haven't even begun to sprout. So again, this is 21 days, and you can see these are the sunflowers. You can see how oval shaped and kind of smooth these are. And they're just those in this photo about ready to harvest. And then right here on the 26th, so I did that 10 days later, these sunflowers are ready. You can see the oval shaped leaves, and then the true leaves are starting to develop. So those are just a little past their harvest prime. And the radishes, you could still harvest these, but again, you would harvest them a little bit younger than that. So containers, and so there's a lot of different types of containers you can use. You can reuse containers. Takeout containers work great. On the left of this slide, I do have a 10-10, so it's 10 inches by 10 inches. It's a tray without holes. And again, this is about, I think, 2.5 inches or 3 inches tall. I don't need to put that much soil in there. So a 1/2 inch to an inch the most to plant our microgreens is all you need. On the right here is a takeout container that's clear plastic that would work fine also for microgreens. Just be sure to clean them out and wash them really well before you use them. Again, so just some more examples of some takeout containers that I've had that you can use to grow microgreens. You don't have to go and buy expensive containers for these. The nice thing about the ones with the lids here is it will keep the humidity a little higher on them. Once they start growing, they'll grow pretty quick, and you'll need to take the lid off to allow them to continue to grow. And then the other thing about growing these inside are light. And so I grow my microgreens inside, and I just have a big bay window in the front that I set them by. The thing is, though, they will grow towards the light very quickly, and so you have to kind of turn them around a lot, or you can purchase some grow lights, which you put the light directly over top of the plants so they don't start growing really tall real quick and growing over to the side where the light is shining. Another fun thing about microgreens, if you have kids, is I've done this project with my children, and vegetables that they wouldn't eat normally, microgreens, they've eaten them and they love them. So it kind of gets kids interested in gardening if they haven't done that before. So it's a good example of trying new things. So a couple things about seeds. And so typically microgreens, we do harvest them very young, shortly after they've sprouted. So a lot of times for microgreens, you would recommend using organic seeds. One thing that you can find seeds locally sometimes that have been treated by a fungicide. And fungicides help reduce fungus from developing and killing plants when they're first sprouting. That tends to be a lot of beans. Sometimes you'll buy in packages might have a pink coating on it, and that's fungicide. So I would avoid those for your microgreen seeds. You can, what I would recommend a lot of times is buying seeds that are marked for microgreens. And so that helps ensure that they're usually organic, and also usually haven't been treated with a fungicide when you do that. And so to get seeds in bulk, you can try looking around the garden centers, but when you look at your seed packets, try to see, a lot of times they'll tell you how many seeds are on there. If you're buying for microgreens, you need more than what's in a typical, normal size seed pack. And so there's a couple online places. I tend to buy them from Johnny Seeds, and I've used them a lot. There's another one, True Leaf Market, and High Mowing Seeds are some other sources that you can buy them, and you just go microgreens, and they'll give you a whole list of things to choose from. Probably too many. It might overwhelm you at first, but it's a good place to go. And then when you buy those, they'll tell you about how many seeds per pound or how many seeds per packet, and you can kind of see, you might want to start off by not buying a pound of seed. That's going to be a lot of seed, and if you don't like the actual microgreen, the flavor of it, or how it grows, you can waste some money. So you might want to buy a smaller amount first. So that's where I would recommend just looking for microgreen seeds. you can also, if you have a garden already outside, you can save your own seeds and use those. We do have a class coming up in this free series later on in a few weeks that is how to save seeds, and so I welcome you to come sign up for that one. But I'm going to quickly share my screen and show you a couple of the websites of the microgreen websites that I mentioned, just so you can be familiar with them. So this one is called True Green Seeds, True Leaf Market, so again, they have a lot of different kinds of supplies that you can buy. And then I'm going to go back and share a different screen. Sorry, I had the wrong. There we go. All right, so True Leaf Market, and you can see they've got a list of microgreen seeds you can purchase. This seed is High Mowing Organic Seed Company. I've not purchased from them before. I've purchased some from True Leaf in the past. And then Johnny Seeds, which again has a lot of great organic seeds and a large selection of microgreens. So that's kind of in a quick nutshell. I know these these classes are a little 30 minutes. Try to just get you beginning information. Again, I'll be recorded this and I'll be posting this online. If anybody has any questions, you can put those in the chat and I will answer those. And if you can just send me an email if you have any other questions later on. And my email I will put in the chat for everybody if you have any additional questions that I'm not able to answer. It's dstowell@utk.edu is my email. All right. And if there are no questions, we are kind of finished with that now. Again, we have a whole series of classes, and I'll share that right now real quick. If you go to the UT Gardens website and go to Seriously Gardening section, we do have next week we have edible flowers and how to use them. That will be a in-person with 5 people can sign up for that one, and the rest will be using Facebook Live. So that's a little different than the other one. Integrated pest management will be coming up later in August. Seed savings August 28th. Cover crops for fall will be September 4th. Cold frames September 11th, and growing lettuce indoors September 18th. And the final one for this series is putting your garden to rest for the winter on September 24th. I did have one question. What's your experience for growing inside a home, and does it affect growth? So yeah, that's how I do it. Actually, just I've done it classes before and I've grown before. And this past spring, my wife had said, hey, why don't we do some microgreens and let the kids do it, give them something to do when we were at home. And so yeah, so the small containers work great, and that's why I don't use holes in the ones I have, and I just use just a simple squirt bottle. It works well. You do need light, so if you have to have some kind of window or a grow light. And again, they will kind of lean towards the side of the light, and so you kind of daily or several times a day I'll have to turn them because I don't have a grow light at my house. But they're very easy to do at the house inside, and in fact I would recommend doing that if you have space. And so we have a little table with an area in our one room that is a good location right by the window and works really well. So AC, I haven't. That room doesn't have direct AC, and it really shouldn't affect it too much as it's going. If your germination usually takes a certain temperature, and so if you're right by an AC vent, you might want to move that during the summertime when you're running the AC. All right, another follow-up is on what your answer now is it possible to grow all year long? And so yeah, and so we started in early March during, we had frost and everything, and so what the nice thing about this is, if you have your seeds, every 7 to 14 days you harvest them, go back and sow them again. You could also have a couple trays and stagger them, so sow some today, sow some in 3 days, and you can have a fairly constant supply of microgreens throughout the year if you would like to do that. Lidded deli containers could work. You just need to make sure they have light, and so if there's a clear lid, it does help a little bit with that. Again, most of these also, I forgot to mention, a lot of these seeds, broccoli, cabbages, kales, spinach, lettuce are all cool season vegetables too. So as far as temperature, germination, you need a little bit warmer temperatures, but they like the cool temperatures anyway, so that's not going to cause too much of a problem. In the wintertime, if you're running the heat, you might dry out faster, and you just need to water it more often to kind of be aware of that. All right. Well, thank you again for everybody for joining us today, and I hope you enjoyed the class, and hopefully you enjoy getting some microgreens and starting to grow them at home and provide some great food for you. And then I guess I didn't mention what to do with them, and I tend to put them in salads. You can also put them on sandwiches or just eat them in plain, raw, uncooked. And again, they have a lot of flavor. So. And just experiment with the different seeds and see which flavors you like. Some lettuces are real bitter and some are more kind of nutty or sweet flavored. And so, just kind of experiment around and know what your tastes are, and then, and try to see what would match to that. So I would like to say, everybody, again, thank you for coming. And this will be posted online later today.